like with Hospital, bringing it to Switch, we just felt like it works really well on the Switch, like being able to play on the train or on the toilet, my personal preference for where I like to play. And so we actually did, we kind of rebuilt everything from scratch, and rebuilt all of the systems within the game just to make sure that the game would run nicely on the Switch, and that you'd be able to have this nice busy campus with students milling around it, and it would just make our lives easier developing it so that we can do that simultaneous release. And obviously we wanted it to feel like it exists within the same universe as 2 Point Hospital. We've established this interesting world with 2 Point Hospital, so we did want it to feel like it lives within that world. But we were very keen for the game to feel like its own unique thing. And so there's quite a lot of big differences. I mean, for a start, we're giving the player a lot more creative freedom with Campus. You can basically lay out your campus however you want to. You're not restricted to the buildings that we gave you like you were in Hospital. You can decorate the entire campus grounds. You can take a building that we give you and then just completely demolish it, or maybe extend it or delete bits from it and make it the shape that works for you. Mix stuff up a bit, maybe have your social areas here, and then do I stick my dorms right next to my lecture theatre so they can quickly jump out of bed and get straight into a lecture, that kind of thing. So that creative freedom really gives you so many different ways that you can play the game, and I think as you progress into the game, you just gain access to all of these different tools, like new rooms that open up, new courses that you gain access to. That side of Campus feels very different to Hospital. The other thing that we were quite keen to do coming out of Hospital was to focus in on these little people more than we did in Hospital. Obviously, in Hospital, a patient comes into the hospital, they get diagnosed, they get treated, and then they're either off down the street or, sadly, they die in the corridor and turn into a ghost. But your incentive as a player is to try and get patients through the system as fast as possible. Whereas with Campus, we thought, right, well, how can we actually give you a reason to get to know these people a bit better? And so with that education setting, it felt like, right, the life of a student, there's so much more opportunity to get to know a few of them, follow them around, see what they get up to, sort of follow the stories of these students through their course. You progress through the year, you nurture them throughout the year and see if you can give them the best social life and the best academic life. Then it's quite a different loop to Hospital in that respect. They're going to be here for 3 years of game time, so you obviously have to keep them happy so they don't decide to drop out. You also need to make sure that they get good grades so they don't fail at the end of the year. So yeah, that feels quite different in Campus compared to Hospital. You can actually go and favourite your students if you want to. You can pick out either like your top student, the one that seems to be doing really well, maybe even a struggling student because you want to help them through the process and stop them from failing or dropping out. Or maybe you just pick the one that's got the funniest name, that kind of thing. Or you love their appearance, you just think, right, I just want to keep tabs on that person. And that's great because you get little updates about what they've done, so it'll tell you, oh, they've just joined a club, or oh, they've just become best friends with this other student, that kind of thing, and it weaves a bit of a story for that character, which I think really adds a nice dimension to the game that you just didn't get in Hospital.
Skills are non-transferable.
I think we very much set ourselves this task of, can we come up with puns that are even more ridiculous than they were in Hospital? But when we started talking about Campus, it felt like, oh, it's actually, there's so much that we can riff on in terms of just the humour side of the game and just that education setting, right? There's lots of things that we can put our own twist on, real world courses but with a 2-point twist, or completely fantastical courses. There's a lot of pop culture that we can lean into, TV shows, films, that kind of thing. And so there were a lot of opportunities there for us to put our own silly twist on things that are out there already, and lean into maybe a little bit of nostalgia that people have for, you know, even if they've not been to university, their time at school or college, you know, maybe the eccentric teachers that they had, or their slightly weird classmates that used to sit in the corner eating crayons, or whatever it happens to be. So it felt like there were a lot of opportunities there for us to just play around with that silliness and that humour. Trying to find that right balance so that there's enough familiar elements for everyone wherever they're from in the world. That was interesting, because even down to things like grading systems, for example, we wanted people to be able to effectively kind of role play their sort of university. So if you do want to create the frat houses and sorority houses, then you can kind of do that. It's not necessarily called that in the game, but you can go and rename your dormitories and call them whatever you want, and maybe recreate your own high school or college or university, at least to some extent. Sort of personalise it to your own view on you know, your own educational experience of what you're trying to recreate from a film or a TV show. The creative tools that we've got in campus, some of the stuff there we did talk about on Hospital, like should we let you put things outside, should we let you edit a building, that kind of thing. But with Hospital it would have been very difficult to add that as an update, for example. And we kind of designed the game around you having these restrictions with the buildings that we gave you. So it was really nice to take the building system that we had in Hospital and sort of basically rebuild it, but rebuild it in a way that means that right now I can go and add bits to my buildings. I can, you know, I can extend a room without kicking everyone out of it, which in Hospital, anytime you wanted to edit a room, everyone just gets kicked out of it. But we knew that wasn't going to work in campus, because you quite often got multiple people in all the rooms. You don't really want, it's going to be way too disruptive to kick people out. So yeah, we built those tools in a way that I think, you know, it just takes it that step beyond. There's enough freedom there that you can create some slightly ridiculous situations, like basically, obviously the academic year is based around, you know, here's the timetable, here's where your classes are going to be. Students need to get to their classes on time. But with the tools we've given you, you can, if you want to, you can make a little maze that they have to get through to get to their classes. And I mean, the game doesn't encourage you to do that, but you know, that is an option, and I think there are some players want to experiment with that kind of stuff, and that's part of the fun of the game, is just thinking about how you should utilise these things, because maybe you want to route them through a little maze that's a really nice, attractive garden, because then they think the campus is beautiful because they're constantly walking through this really prettied up pathway. So yeah, there's sometimes reasons to design stuff in a way that might not, at least on the surface, seem like a sensible way to lay out a campus. There's a lot going on in campus. I'd say there's definitely more depth to it. There's more depth to the characters. There's so many different ways that you can shape your students, for example. You know, they have their course that they're doing, but then they've also got their social life as well, and there are all sorts of different ways that you can try and nurture them and keep them happy. You know, you can be putting on social events, you can be starting up clubs to teach their students new skills, you can be going and customising their dormitory or putting on films in the lecture theatre for them, and there's just a lot more to their life on campus that means that you've got a lot more to play with, and a lot more strategies for how you approach things. Like maybe you want to play as, all right, I'm all in on the academic side. I'm not going to give them anything fun to do. I'm just going to make sure I'm going to be sending them for private tuition constantly and making sure they get to the classes on time. But, you know, how's that going to pan out if they've not got anything fun to do? but then you can play the opposite way and just focus in on the social life, and maybe that's at the expense of their grades, or maybe actually it will keep them happy enough that they end up working a bit harder. So yeah, there's just, I think there's a lot more scope for playing this game in different ways and experimenting with different strategies.
Cheesy Gubbins are back! Where did they go? Nowhere! Cheesy Gubbins. The only thing you can count on.
We always talk about our games being approachable but having that depth to them, and we always want them to have that depth to them, but that does create a challenge in terms of keeping it simple for a new player or a more casual player. And we've put a lot of effort into doing that. We spend a lot of time thinking about, right, here's all the features in the game, and then how can we drip feed those to the player in such a way that when you start the game you're not overwhelmed, but then we gradually ease you in, and then before you know it, even if actually you don't usually play deep sim management games, you're suddenly doing all of these things and spinning all these plates that you would never have thought about at the start of the game. So we put a lot of time into figuring out that flow of the early levels, right? What order should we introduce the features to you? Some of the more advanced features, you don't necessarily have to use them, but we want them to be there so that you can be sort of tempted into using them as you progress into the game. As you get into more challenging scenarios, you might start thinking, okay, yeah, I should take out a loan, or oh yeah, maybe I should mess around with the permissions on the rooms, or which jobs I want my staff to do, because then that just means that students can get to their classes a bit quicker, or the staff are working more efficiently, that kind of thing. And it's not something that you would even think about doing at the start of the game, but we want to try and just ease people in and then get them to that point where they're comfortable enough with the rest of the game that they start to dabble in all of these other bits.
Final question, do you aim to provide private dorms for people, or do you shove them all in together?
So I'm a fan of having like a few people to a dorm. I think it's nice to have some housemates. I was a big fan when I was at university. I wasn't sharing a room with people, but I had people on my corridor, and I hung out with them in the kitchen, and it was a lot of fun. And so in campus, I like to create my dorms in little clusters, and I'll sometimes set them up so that they're for specific courses, so I can keep my knights in that room and I can keep my wizards in the dormitory over there. And then you can tailor the dorm, you can put, customize the wallpaper and the floor, and put down some of their favorite items that they like to interact with. I'm a big fan of the Goths. I don't know if you've seen the Goths, but yeah, there's the dorms have some great options that you can use for keeping your Goths happy. So yeah, that's what I like to do.
Tremendous, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much, Ben.